when it comes to strategic, international affairs, crises. Because it's, and I come from Appalachia. Most of my relatives thought deliverance was a love story, so I understand this. Washington's incestuous. I mean, Democrats, Republicans, they come up with different answers. But they have the same roots. They go to the same schools. Their kids go to the same schools. They live in the same neighborhoods. They go to the same restaurants. And they cling passionately to the 20th century. Because the 20th century seems knowable. We won that one. It's reassuring. Whereas if we try, if we make even the barest attempt to understand the various torrents flowing together at the dawn of the 21st century, it's absolutely terrifying because the old verities don't apply. And I would just like to briefly talk about a few of those currents. And again, I can only sketch them. I wish I had more time. You may not wish that. But nonetheless, to start off with, you all heard President Bush, in his day, say that we're in a war of ideas. It's absolute nonsense. The age of ideology, this bizarre human detour, very short in historical terms, 200 years, 1789, 1991, or 1989 if you want to date it just to the fall of the wall, for 200 years. In the wake of the dawn of the age of reason, certainly the most unreasonable period in human history, you had two things happen. First, egomaniacs, individuals, decided that they could sit down in the reading room of the British Library, the British Museum, or in a cafe in Zurich, or a cave in Yunnan, and single-handedly design a better system of human social, economic, political, and cultural organization than human collectives had done over the centuries. The Marxes, the Lenins, the Trotskys, the forgotten ones, the Lassalles, the Fouriers, the Walmart versions, the Hitlers, the Mussolinis, and then the Maos and the Pol Pots. And of course, when human beings, in all of our glorious imperfection, didn't shape up to the system, the answer was never to adapt the system, but rather to force human beings to adapt. And so you had Auschwitz, or the Gulag, or the killing fields of Cambodia, or you were on the road to Srebrenica. And those were the easy struggles. What are we in? When we look at Islamist extremists, and I stress Islamist extremists, not Muslims overall by no means. And what we're seeing now is really the extremists within the Islamic world, who are a minority of a minority, the deadly extremists, are the canaries in the coal mine. Because the crucial crisis shaping up for the 21st century is occurring not between religions, although that's always there. Religions don't cooperate, they just don't. Not in times of crisis. I wish they did. What we're seeing is a crisis within every major religion. Between those who believe in a merciful, loving God, and those who believe in God as the mean study hall monitor who put us here to find an excuse to punish us. But think about it. We have violent extremists in every major religion today. We tend to see it because we were attacked by Al-Qaeda as, it's the Muslims. But if you're a Muslim in India, where you're a minority, then you deal with the Hindu attacks on the beautiful old Ayodhya mosque, which was leveled. We're not in a war of ideas. Democracy, our democracy, is not an ideology. You can graft ideologies onto it, but it doesn't end in ISM. Democracy is a technique that uses a tool of elections. We're not in a battle of ideas. We're in another form of asymmetrical conflict. We're fighting for our values. Al-Qaeda and its ilk are fighting for their faith, their vision of their faith, their perverse vision of a great faith. But the hardcore actors are passionate believers. Another problem Washington has is even Washingtonians who go to church or synagogue or temple every week and think they're religious aren't. They're educated to secularism. They do not understand the visceral, transformative, radiant, glorious power of revelatory faith. And so Washington tries to deny that religion has anything to do with this. Intelligence agencies are discouraged from talking about Islamist extremists because we don't want to offend Muslims. I don't want to offend Muslims. I don't want to offend anybody, but if your enemy is a terrorist and he tells you he's an Islamist, it might be fair to call him an Islamist terrorist. And oh, by the way, let's call Hindu terrorists, and Christian terrorists, Christian terrorists. Religion is irreducible, and at the end of the age of ideology, humanity is defaulting to its basic identities. This is a time of global crisis. In every country and culture and civilization, people are asking the same basic question, if in different languages. Who am I? And the fundamental default positions for human beings are blood, my family, clan, tribe, my nation, and faith. So we're dealing with fundamental identities. What else are we dealing with? We're dealing with the horrible legacies of colonialism. And it's a travesty and a tragedy that the United States, the greatest force for democracy and freedom of all of human history, is now using our blood and treasure to defend the worst legacy, the worst existing legacy of European colonialism: artificial borders. Now, if you want to have someone faint at the State Department, go there and mention changing borders. And they will tell you, there's no mechanism for doing that. Okay. Well, you have a choice. We either get one for a slightly better version of changing borders according to the will of the people as manifested by local majorities, or we're going to have no end of the wars in Eastern Congo, or the Balkans, or the Kurdistan that technically doesn't exist, or the Northwest Frontier provinces, the Pashtunistan that doesn't exist. When the Europeans leave, what do they leave behind? Borders of Africa designed in Berlin in the 1880s by people who had never been to Africa, who didn't know what was in the interior, who did not care where the tribal boundaries were, who didn't even know where the river lines were. Or in the Middle East, which after Versailles carved up because, well, the French get this, the Brits get that, the oil fields are here. And what do these bad borders around the world do? They push people together who don't want to be together, or they drive people apart who do want to be together. Think of every war and conflict, violent conflict, in which the United States has engaged since Desert Storm, including Desert Storm. Every one caused by or exacerbated by European-designed artificial borders. So we've got people defaulting to the most fundamental identities, blood and faith, in a world deformed by bad borders. Which brings me to another great unstated strategic factor you never hear about in Washington briefings: jealousy. Everyone in this room knows a human being who's damaged or even ruined their life over jealousy. You don't think human collectives feel jealousy? Whoever's on top, others will always be jealous. And as another brief aside, anti-Americanism is dramatically overstated. Not least by the press, because who does the press talk to? Usually other English speakers, which are professors, other journalists, or people senior in state. And when I go to the back country of Africa, or even parts of the Middle East, you know, I get the 30-second diatribe about why is America doing this to us, and then the 2 hours questions about American government and how do I get a green card. You know, and that's obviously being slightly flippant. Do not fall into another Washington trap. That of talking about how states act and peoples act in their rational self-interest. We don't even buy cars in our rational self-interest. You know, a guy buys a car, he studies all the facts and the data and the specs and buys the one he likes. In times of crisis, it all goes haywire. Explain the Holocaust in terms of German rational self-interest. The world becomes much more clear if you analyze in terms of emotional self-interest. I once heard the question asked of a military officer in Iraq, what would be an acceptable level of casualties? And the answer was a busload of journalists going off a cliff. But maybe an acceptable level of casualties would be for Washington's older generation of politicians to all get good retirement jobs somewhere else. A new century needs new thinking. Whether they're left or right, the old answers aren't the right answers. And we're Americans. We should be looking forward, not reminiscing about how great it was during the Cold War. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. God bless and good luck.